All right, Ashton, how are you? All right, so I decided to pick up a brush and a stick. So there's no rules, right? Um, I love combining different tools in different hands. I typically stick with brushes, sticks, and mallets as my primary tools these days. I've tried all kinds of things over the years, but I sort of like that trinity, if you will, that combination of those three things. They're sort of the most standard and the most useful, I find, and I sort of limit myself to those three things. So in my stick bag over here, you're only going to find sticks, brushes, and mallets. I don't mess with bundle sticks of any kind anymore. I don't mess with playing with my hands very often. There's probably other things I've made a lot of things over the years, like little, like taped up little dowels and like cardboard things and whatever. So, anyways, there's no rules. I decided to mix the tools there, and basically I decided to use my brush as a snare, essentially, by putting it on the tom, and then you hit the tom with a stick. It sounds a little bit more like a snare drum, right? I'm just sort of resting it on there, not putting very much pressure, and you get that buzz sound. And then, of course, you can remove it to hear just the plain natural tom sound. And then I just improvised over whatever came out of me initially. I committed to those ideas. So basically, the idea was playing on the tom, whatever, rhythmically, just getting that sort of snare sound. And then I had a couple little kick drum hits in there, and then I ended up doing this bell thing on all three of the cymbals. And so I just committed to that. That was like my idea. And in a way, it was like three separate ideas in a way, right? We had the tom thing, and then the kick, and then the bells. But all of those combined made up my one idea, or my one theme. And it's effective music making. Effective music making. I should coin that phrase. The human ear, it likes repetition. And if you're just sitting back and listening to something, it wants to recognize what it's listening to, and that is easier when there's repetition involved. Not to say we don't like abstract all over the place things from time to time, but for the most part, I've learned to limit myself to play things that are a little more recognizable and maybe have some more repetition. And I know this is a little bit of a vague concept, and I didn't plan on going into this today, but here we are. So, you listen to any music and even get outside of drums specifically, great examples would be like old classical music, symphonic music, strings, violins, classical music. The composers that wrote that stuff, that music's very repetitive. We usually think of it more in a melodic sense. There's certain melodies and stuff, but those composers, they very much thought in terms of specific ideas as a theme, and then sort of making variations upon that theme. And the human ear likes that. So that's essentially how I approached that little improvisation I played for you. It's really how I approach everything, even if I'm just playing a groove in a song. that groove becomes my theme. And then I might play variations upon that theme, either by adding things or subtracting things from it, or changing things about it. So again, we had that main idea. Eventually, I landed into some sort of groove, right? I ended up playing quarter notes in the kick drum, bringing in the left foot over here, and then it became a little bit more about the tom-tom thing, and then throwing in the bells wherever. So I ended up having sort of a groove motor in my feet, and then working within the tom and the bell to create variations upon the original theme, if that makes sense. So, cool. Just things to think about when we get into more improvisation and more soloing. If we get into those things at some point, we'll certainly be talking more about this type of stuff. Ideas, themes, variations, sections, form, those types of things. So, groovy. On with today's lesson. Let's look at our triplet bass grooves first. So, those are looking good. Rim shot is sounding more consistent. That's great. And yeah, it's looking good. So I have a couple new ones for this week. And I moved on to a new page. I'll take a picture of this and send it to you, of course. Let's just do a whole nother page, basically, of, I guess, more rockish type shuffles where we're using the kick drum to create variation, basically, different rhythms. A lot of times in this context, the bass player or the bass guitar would be locking in with these type of kick drum rhythms. So this type of thing is pretty typical. So I'm getting a little more complex with this, putting the kick drums in places that I think are a little bit more challenging to pull off. So this one here, so shuffle 80-ish, do do gat do gat do do gat do gat, and then this one do gat do gat do gat. Oh, sorry, I messed that part up. Do gat do gat do gat do gat do gat do gat. Right. And then 3 more down here. It's all you, man. Write in your own ideas. Keeping the hi-hat the same, or the right hand. Keeping the snare drum on 2 and 4. But of course, kick drums can go wherever you want them to be. Or wherever you want them to go. Keep in mind, if you're doing multiple kick drums in a row as triplets, like that's certainly valid. That doesn't come up too often, and if we get much faster than 85, that kind of stuff isn't so possible, but it's fair game. You do whatever you want. Be mindful of the 8th note rests, the 3s above the notes. This is a little bit trickier to write out if you've never written something like that. And if you want to put a kick drum somewhere where there is a rest, of course, there's not going to be a rest there, like in these over here. And so there's 3 there. If that's too much for this week, just do 1 or just do 2. You know, whatever works for you. Cool. All right. So I'll demonstrate these for you. And maybe we can go up to 85. We were at 80. 85 is just a pinch faster. It feels pretty good. And let's stick with the rim shot, of course. let's make our kick drums really strong. If anything about your grooves this week, I noticed that your kick drum was a tiny bit wimpy. Maybe wimpy is not the best word because a lot of times we do want wimpy, like when we're stirring with brushes. But with these grooves, especially if we're playing a rim shot, the rim shot's loud, right? And we want our kick drum to be of equal impact to the snare drum. So, probably because you've been working on playing quietly with your right foot, and now your right foot's like losing a little bit of its grit, right? So, but we want the kick drum to be really strong with these, so equal to the snare drum. And maybe we can change up our hi-hat sound a little bit for this week. We've been working just very much closed. How about we open it up just a tiny bit so it's still closed, more or less, but it has just a little bit of wash to it. Maybe right in there. It's just a little bit sloppier. It has a little bit more dirt to it. As opposed to all the way closed. Which is all clean and appropriate, right? Sometimes we want that dirty, sloshy, loose kind of thing. But just a little bit. I'm not going like here. Right? So just finding that sweet spot. Just releasing a little bit of pressure with the left foot and the left leg. So we just get a tiny bit of wash in there. Alright. So here's the first one. 85. Do da do. Do da do. The next one, do gat do ga do gat do ga do. And I keep missing the kick drum on one. This one's a little bit tricky for me. I haven't practiced this one yet. Do gat do ga do. Groovy. So, strong, right? I'm playing pretty loud right now. Pretty strong. Like, treating it like good pop rock, right? This is a whole nother thing to get into, but, you know, volume is very much dictated by the situation that you're playing in, and there are certainly a lot of times where even though I might be playing something like that, and it's pop and it's rock, it can't be as loud as that. Maybe it has to be half that volume, or a quarter of that volume. It's very real. And, that's where just control, ability to have different dynamic levels within your system and be comfortable with those is good. But I would say, if volume, if us as drummers can dictate the volume, if it's a pop, rock, strong type of song, and you're playing that sort of groove, that kind of volume is preferable, for sure. It feels right when we're playing it, and just sound-wise, it sounds right. You do get a certain sound by playing louder. And certainly if you want a rim shot, if you were to play this groove at a quarter of that volume, you wouldn't be able to play a rim shot because it would just be too loud. And therefore you're sacrificing your snare drum sound, if that's what you wanted. So, again, this is a whole other discussion. You'll learn about these things the more you play with people, the more you gig out and play out, which of course isn't happening so much right now. I would love to talk more about that when need be. So, cool. All right. So, that's our triplet bass grooves. As far as the first page, you can keep working on those if you want. They sound good to me, but maybe just focus on the second page mostly, on the 2 I gave you for this week, and whatever you're gonna write down here. Cool. All right. Stirring with brushes. Okay, so the straight up smooth stirring with the feet. That looks really, really nice. Yeah, it looks like it's comfortable for you. It's interesting. The direction you're moving and the motion that you have in your arms and hands and body, it's like, it looks really, really good compared to just a few weeks ago when we introduced this idea. Now it looks like it's comfortable for you. That happened fast, so I'm impressed. Can we get that faster? Just the plain stirring. So we were like 80. Can you get to 120? Woo! Oh, that's kind of where I just was. All right. Keeping my bass drum quiet. Just the hands, making sure I'm crossing on the downbeats still. That might feel pretty quick to you. That's not slow. So see if you can get up to 120. Try it. One thing I've mentioned, you probably need to make your circles smaller. I definitely did, because there's just not enough time to make your circles big when things get fast. So my circles were much smaller. I was much more in the middle of the drum, and I'd say my circles were, they kind of were half the size of what they could be when I was at 70 or 80 or whatever. Okay, and then as far as tapping with the right hand, so I'm glad that was challenging. The feet were, of course, cool. The left hand looked cool. You mentioned that was tricky, but it looked good. It was staying in time. You were at the top of the drum on the downbeats. The only problem was the right hand. You changed the original motion that you had, because it's weird for you, right? No big deal. So 70-ish. So this is what yours look like. You see my right hand? It's sort of tapping on the right side of the drum and kind of pulling towards me. Now, I mean, you certainly could do it that way, but it probably doesn't make the most sense because a lot of times when we're playing accents or rhythms in the right hand with a stirring type pattern, it's all based around the stirring type pattern. That's our foundation. That's our fundamental. So it doesn't make sense to change the motion of the right hand. We're just making it harder for ourselves. I'm not explaining that very well, but I've never had to explain it before. You know, keeping consistent motion within everything we do on this instrument will just make us more efficient. It'll make it sound better, and it'll make it feel better and groove better. So if we don't have to change the motion, then we probably shouldn't. So with the original stirring, our right hand is making circles, right? And it's coming back to the top of the drum on the downbeats. So when I play this, it feels really good to just keep that same motion and then just lift off and come down for the tap on the downbeats. Instead of changing my motion, which is what you did, and changing my position on the drum, there were like 2 changes that happened there. Okay, so again, my right hand, 1, 2, 3, 4. To get the tap in there, I'm just going to lift off and then come down for the tap on downbeats. But I'm still making these circles, and I'm still in the same position on the drum. 1, 2, 3, 4. Slow it down a little bit. See that? It's the same motion. It's the same position. And admittedly, my tap is probably happening a little bit further to the left as I'm noticing this. Maybe not right in the middle at the top of the drum for whatever reason. I don't know if I play it together if that changes. I guess it could be either or. It feels, for whatever reason, it feels more natural to play it a little bit to the left. Even though when I'm stirring, yeah, maybe my accent's happening slightly to the left. The things you notice when you actually pay attention. Cool, but I would recommend, you know, trying to keep as much of that motion as possible, because it's all based around that foundation that we created. Okay? Alright. Hopefully that makes sense. So again, it's, you know, it's kind of a coordination challenge for you right now, which is no biggie. You just have to, like, slow it down, break it apart, leave the feet out, bring the feet in, try just the right hand by itself, try just the left hand by itself, put them together. Oh, it's all messed up when I put them together. Okay, I need to work on the right hand more just by itself. It's just that kind of process, right? Cool. All right. Rudiments. Okay, so that's cool. I'm glad you noticed that choking up was better for you. I will say that as the video went on, you kept coming back. And this is normal. This happened to me. Still does. Not as much. So when I was trying to train myself, like with sticks, to play in a more choked up position, because I think for a long time I wasn't. I was more back on the stick. But I realized, especially once I started studying jazz, playing at lower volumes, playing with more detail and intricacy, that choking up more on the stick was definitely beneficial. But I wasn't used to it. So as I played, I'd start there, but I kept coming back down here. And it was hard to remember. So what I would do is take like a magic permanent marker, and I would just draw a line around the stick, a nice big fat line that I could see, where basically that's like where my thumb and my finger are supposed to go, right? And I'd put those lines on both of my sticks. For years, all of my drumsticks had lines on them. Now, with brushes, I think your brushes are black, so that might not work, but maybe you have like a paint marker, or probably like a piece of tape, like a piece of masking tape or something. You could use that and put it on there, just so like as a reminder. And every time you look down, you're like, oh, whoops, I need to go back to the tape, right? So that might help. It definitely sounded better when you were choked up. By the time you got to flam taps, you were like way down here on the brushes. And it sounded louder for sure, but kind of sloppier and flatter on the brushes, less attack, less precision. So, yeah. See if you can go with the choked up thing. Certainly for these low volume, detailed rudiment type things, that's definitely a preferable position for that type of stuff. Cool, but everything's sounding good, especially when you were choked up. Flams were good. Maybe a little bit too much of an accent. Now I'm splitting hairs with you, but I mean, they should be. I guess it's more about making the low volume part of the flam, the first little note, making that softer, and making the accented note just a little bit louder, right? So if I was gonna play the whole rudiments thing, like roughs, at this kind of volume, by the time I get to flams, I don't want them to be this. Right? It's like a whole different thing, right? I want to stay within the theme that I created in the beginning, the dynamic theme. So if my roughs were here and everything else I'm playing is there, lesson 25, and then when I go to flams, it's still kind of the same volume. Maybe just a little bit louder with the accents, and really just trying to make sure the unaccented notes are indeed unaccented. Cool. Add flamadiddle for this week. And we're just cruising through this stuff, which is great. So, I guess that's it for this week. Any other things worth mentioning here? Yep, I think we covered it. Cool. Alrighty, my friend. See you next time. Hope things are good. Bye.